Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It is PC building time once again, as you can probably tell by the parts across the desk. Today we're going to build a system around the AMD 5800X3D. Now AM5 of course launched this week, but there are a few downsides using that platform, such as expensive DDR5 and not to mention the motherboard prices. So we're going to aim to build a PC that's going to squeeze the most performance possible out of some still relatively affordable parts. So we're going to go step by step throughout this video and talk about the parts as we go throughout the video. So let's not waffle on and just get started. So first things first, I've got the motherboard, our memory, storage and our processor all on the table. We're going to get everything into the motherboard and then we can install that into the case. So the motherboard we're going to use is the ASUS TUF X570 Pro Wi-Fi 2. I will have a separate overview on this video. Should be live just after this video goes out if you're interested and want to see a bit more details. So the 5800X3D is a version of the 5800X that has 96 megabytes of level 3 cache. So it makes it more of a gamer CPU, but it will give you a major advantage with frames a second over the standard 5800X. Very kindly sent out by Scan, who are a UK retailer that sell anything and everything to do with technology. If you can't buy it on their website, it's not worth buying. So they have a massive range and I will link them in the description. And a big thank you again for them sending this out. And also the graphics card you'll see later on. So we're going to get this installed. So AMD socket, AM4. So we're going to lift the little lever up. This will install 90 degrees right for AM4. AM5 is portrait, so that will just drop down in like that, give it a bit of a wiggle, and we'll put that latch back down. That's that done. Next up, we've got our memory. So this is a Kingston Fury Beast DDR4, it's 3600 mega transfers per second, and I've got a 32 gigabyte kit, cram as much as we can into this build. So we're going to make sure we've got our notches lined up correctly, and then we're going to slide that in and push down till we get 2 clicks, and then rinse and repeat for the other 3 sticks. There we go, and that's our 4th stick. Now the little latch didn't go all the way, sometimes that can happen, so just pushing that home will be fine. So for storage, we're going for the Seagate Firecuda 530. This is a 7000 read and write drive, Gen 4 of course, and it's one of the fastest that Scan have tested, so absolutely blazingly fast. And this will just literally simply push into the right hand side of the socket, and then ASUS have got their Q latch on this, so very easy to just push the little latch over, installed. I really love the toolless designs they now have. So that's those things installed quick and painlessly. Now I'm going to get the brackets sorted for our cooler, as we need to do some adjustments from the standard brackets. So the cooler we're going to be using for this is the Noctua NH-U12A Chromax Black Edition. This supports the LGA 1700 and also AM5 sockets should you want to use it on a newer motherboard. They also have a wide compatibility checklist on the site as well if you want to use an older cooler with a new socket. Might just be a case you just need an upgrade kit that they will send you out free of charge as well. They've always been great with backwards compatibility. The second a new socket comes out, they'll offer some kind of solution. Even going back to like X58 coolers as well, you can support on the new sockets with an upgrade kit. So they really, give you the most possible out of your products. So we're going to get this mounted with the AMD kit, which is inside our little accessory box. I've also got one of the fans that's on this cooler as well, which is the NFA12. You can actually get color changes as well, so if you want to change the color of the cooler, you can do that. I'm just going to leave it black. I think we're going to go for a black and white thing. We're going to look for our AMD parts, which are on the right hand side. Just double checking the manual if you're not sure. These are slightly longer than the Intel mounting brackets, as the mounting bracket on the AMD is rectangular rather than square. And that's going to use the back plate that's already on the motherboard and just get rid of these plastic clips. So just a case of unscrewing these, just a standard Phillips. So we're going to look for our grey spacers and then the longer screws, which are in this bag here. So we're going to take a spacer, pop it on top of the backplate threads. Then we're going to take the longer screws that are included with the Noctua package and our mounting brackets, and then we're going to line these up and use holes number 4 on the bracket, and then thread through to the underside like so, and then just rinse and repeat on the other side. So this is Noctua's what they call SecuFirm socket, which is one of the best on the market. A lot of companies just rip it off because it is so good, so that should tell you something. And there we go, so that's our mounting installed. So what you'll find is there are 2 spring-loaded clips on each side, which will then go down onto these threads and hold the cooler on. So you would at this point put thermal paste on. You do get NTH1 included in the box, but I'm going to use NTH2 because that's what I always use for testing. Helps me to compare a little bit easier. So I'm just going to do a pea-sized-ish blob. So these just have a little spring-loaded mechanism easy to take off. And then the same on the other side. And as you can see, there's a slight offset in the screws as well that just allows for any memory that you might be using that's a bit of a higher profile. So now we can lower this down, and then we're going to do even tension on each side, kind of alternate between, go down too tight on one side at once, because you might get uneven thermal paste distribution then. Now it's just a case of putting our fans back on. They have got a little indicator on the bottom to show you which direction the airflow goes. General rule of thumb, if you can see the logo, the air is going to come at you. So we're going to be putting it on like that. So there's a header on the motherboard just really conveniently next to that one. So I'm going to plug that one in there. Then the one at the top we'll do as a CPU fan optional. And then see if we can pass any spare back through. There we go. So we don't need to worry about a white split or anything like that. Keeps cables down a little bit. Our case choice for this build is the Corsair 4000X. Great value for money. It's got 3 LED fans in the front. I've added an additional light loop in the back just for a bit of exhaust airflow. So this is the IO shield for the X570 board we're using. Yours might even be built in if you're using a more premium motherboard, if you've splashed out on it. So we're going to just install this as we would look at the motherboard. You can kind of use your actual motherboard as a representation if you can't figure out which way it needs to go. And then this will just pop into the back of the case here and then push in. Be careful, this is very sharp, so you can cut yourself if you're not careful. So now that's in, we can put our motherboard in. So you can lift it up by the heatsink, it's not a problem. It's quite heavy, so just be careful. And then line up your IO and then sit it in. Now of course cases have a little nub in the middle. And then going into our motherboard box, we're going to find the little screws, which are these ones with a kind of extended, kind of look like they've got a built-in washer essentially, and then screw it in. And there we go. So that's now installed. We can look at our power supply now, and then look at get on our cables, routers, graphics card, and we're pretty much done. So moving on to our power supply, this is the EVGA 850. This is the P6 SuperNova, a platinum rated power supply, especially handy if you're living in the UK with the cost of the electricity nowadays. But we're going to get the cables that we need for our system out and ready, and then it's just a case of sliding it in the back. So let's get this open. Models from 650 up to 1000 watts as well for this, so should you be using a card that requires a little bit more power, you can get a higher wattage. So we've got our power cables. We've got two 8-pins, which will be for our graphics card, a SATA cable for the RGB hub, 2 CPU EPS power. These are actually 4+4s, and we're going to be using an 8 and a 4. And then of course our 24-pin for the motherboard. So our graphics cards, we're going to use VGA 4. That's the 2 8-pins. One of the CPUs, obviously we're going to use CPU 1. Second one will go in CPU 2. Make sure you get the ends right as well. SATA, obviously we'll go to SATA. And a motherboard, we'll go to motherboard. Funny that. So this part I'd recommend doing with the case up, but just for the fact I want to show you how to do it, I'm going to do it on its side. So let's take the power supply and then slide it in. We're going to do, as I said, fan side down because we have got nice dust filters on this case. Carefully lower that in. So of course it's on its side, so I need to hold it up when I screw it in, but of course if you do it when it's standing up, you're not going to have that problem. So then using the 4 screws that are included in the box, just screw it in at the back. So now I'm going to feed some of the cables through just to make life a little bit easier. So our CPU ones will go up to the top. I'm going to put them in the very corner. The graphics card will run under the little cutout. You can just about see it on the front camera. And of course the 24-pin will go in through the top. I'm going to run it under these other cables as well. Keep it a little bit more easier to manage. So I want to sort a few of our cables out before we go any further. So I'm going to get the CPU power for the motherboard plugged in. It's going to be a bit tricky for you guys to see, but it's in the top right hand corner. And I'm just going to hold these together, bend them round and plug them in. You could obviously do this beforehand if you want as well. Would probably make a little bit more sense, especially if you're working in a tighter case. Didn't think of that, so I'm doing it this way. Okay, that's done. Oh, that was tricky. It's better to probably train the cables with a bend before you try and put them in, because otherwise you're just fighting basically against the factory stiffness of the cable. So now 24-pin, just going to bend that round. Might do a little bit of wiggling after just to make them look a little bit better. So our other connectors, we've got a USB-C cable. This just goes in this little connector just under the 24-pin. Again, it's a little bit tricky for you guys to see. That will give us our USB-C connectivity on the front of the case. And then we've got our power reset and then also our LEDs if you want to put those in. Just refer to your motherboard for this because it can vary. But generally speaking, they're on the 3rd and 4th pin on the top and bottom. Power on the top and then reset on the bottom. So we'll just go and plug those in as well. And then tuck the excess cable through. There we go. And then we've just got to put our graphics card in. Okay, so our graphics card is the ASUS TUF RTX 3080. This is the 10 gigabytes of DDR6 OC edition, so factory overclocked, and an absolute chungus of a graphics card. I've used this in a test video. I did an unboxing and overview with some testing and stuff, if you want to check it out in a bit more detail. But just absolute solid, very nice card. It's relatively affordable for the 3080 series as well. So we're going to be taking the 2nd and 3rd bracket out, which will then allow us to plug into our PCIe slot. Make sure the clip on the slot is open and then carefully place this down inside. Should hear a click when it's seated. There we go. And then we put screws in. Now, because we're laying this down vertical, I will want to put a little bit of pressure on the card so it doesn't sag quite as much. So I will just kind of push it gently up towards the heatsink, which by the time we screw these in and then let go, will reduce some of the sag on the card as it's quite heavy. The power for these, so we've got our 2 8 pins. These do split off to 6+2s should you need to use those instead. If you've got a card that's like a 3070, for example, that's 1 8 and then 1 6 pin. And now we need to do a bit of cable management and then we can see if it boots. I'm going to be using these simple 4-pin to 2 4-pin adapters. You can plug all the fans individually into the motherboard should you wish. But for just sake of cables, I'm going to use these. You can support quite a few fans on one header, just don't go nuts, like 3 I've used before and it's been fine. I've got the top right, which is the rear exhaust, and I'll do the top left, and then we've got the other 2 and do the same again for those. So there are 2 headers on this motherboard at the bottom, so there's one there and then just one off to the right. So I'm going to route the cables up through just to make it a little bit more tidy and just plug those in, and then we can see if it boots. Okay, so we've got some lights on the motherboard, which is always a good sign. Let's see if we're going to get anything going. Oh, yep, got motherboard lights. Can take a little while to train the memory, so like don't worry if it doesn't come on straight away. So I'd usually just spam delete. I'm just going to hold it because I think it's going to be the easiest way to get into the BIOS because it just loads so fast and I can't catch it. There we go. So now we're into the BIOS. I'm going to go over to the left hand side with DOCP, which is essentially AMD's version of XMP. Go to Profile 1, which will then set our RAM to its rated speed of 3600 mega transfers, cast latency 17, 1.35 volts. I'm then going to F10 and enter. That will sort our XMP out, and then we can go and get into Windows and play some games. Okay, so first up we've got Shadow the Tomb Raider using 2560 by 1440 settings. Everything cranked as high as it can minus VSync. Just look at the other settings there for you. So we're using ultra highest presets, and we'll see how this goes with the benchmark. So that's the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark. It's got an average of 154 frames on 1440p, fully cranked. And you can see on the right hand side the 5800X3D. That V-cache is really going to help us with our gaming performance. So let's move on to our next game and see how we get on with that. Okay, so onto Dirt 5, we're going to be using 1440p, ultra high settings, highest we can possibly find, minus VSync of course, because that just is awful. And we're going to go into one of our playground games for this, and we'll see what kind of frames we can get. This was just a random map, pick of the week on the playground options. So let's see how we go. Averaging now about 200 frames, or too many beans on that one. But we are setting about 170 frames. Generally speaking, we did have a little bit of a higher peak when we were doing the jumps up to 200, but generally speaking there's less to actually render when you're in the air over on the ground. So into Apex Legends, we're using the highest settings that we possibly can, VSync off. I have actually used an advanced option on the Steam settings to do plus FPS _ max unlimited, which will give us a higher frame rate. Otherwise you're just going to get 144 frames all the time, which is obviously okay, but if you've got a hardware that can go higher than that, you're not going to make the most out of it. So now we should see a more realistic example of what the 3080 plus the X3D can do. I don't have any guns, so we're just going for a smash. It's not going to last. Now we're down to 200 frames. Worthwhile to unlock that max FPS as well by using the advanced plus FPS _ max unlimited option in Steam settings. Generally speaking, Valorant's always an easy to run game. As you can see, everything's cranked up and we're still over 500 frames, so it's really nothing taxing. So I think now we're going to move on to Halo Infinite, and then we'll do some Cinebench runs just for those of you that might want to do a little bit more than just gaming. What's MASH? Oh, I got a kill, but it was on AFK, so it doesn't really count. We are sitting around 140, a little bit of a dip there, 134, 140 frames. Looks good though, looks very nice, especially that everything's cranked as well, like, that's great. Got another kill, nice. Ah, shot in the back. How dare you? So yeah, 140-ish frames. Again, if you're going to use a V-Sync monitor, you know, bang up to spec. You could obviously drop it down a little bit more if you want a higher frame rate, but 144 frames is buttery smooth. So yes, let's move on to the last thing we're going to look at, I think, which is Cinebench and some temperatures, and then we'll do a little wrap up. Multi-core Cinebench run, let's see how we get on with this. To give you some ideas on some other CPUs that are on there, we've got in 4th place a 10-core 16-thread 12600K, a Threadripper 12950X 16-core, that's in 3rd place. Intel Xeon W3265M is in 2nd, and then at the top we've got a 2990 Workstation 32-core processor. So currently sitting in 5th with the 5800X3D, 8 cores, 16 threads, but again it's more for the level 3 cache. This isn't the processor that you'd buy if you were just going to do, you know, like video editing, graphic design, animation, that kind of thing. You would buy the 5800X, for example, or you would go for a higher end SKU. I thought I'd put it in there just in case there are anyone that wants to primarily game but does like to do a bit of video editing on the side. So there we go guys, that was the build of the 5800X3D and the 3080. Big thank you to Scan for providing those components to make this content possible. A couple of little thoughts just before I close out the video. As you can see, it's running Cinebench at the moment. Not a SKU that I'd really recommend if you're going to do primarily video editing. Doing a little bit on the side, or, you know, a bit of animation, then, you know, you can definitely get the best of both worlds, but it is definitely a gaming CPU primarily with that level 3 cache. As you can see, the frames we got in the games were very, very nice, especially games like Crysis that are very demanding. So certainly very happy with the performance of the 5800X3D. So I would like to test this with the 5800X as well, the standard version, at some point, just to see how much benefit that level 3 cache does give us. But it certainly did perform very well, and we saw results that matched, if not exceeded, the 12900K, so that should say a lot. I would also just want to give you a couple of pointers that the Noctua cooler I used in this, it did reach a maximum of 90 degrees, so quite toasty, but we have seen 95 degrees from some of the new SKUs, so does it matter that much? Maybe not, but if you want to keep your room a little bit cooler, then maybe a 360 AO or something like that would help for temperatures. And also the fans, I couldn't get my Corsair Commander on the back of the case to work. I've used this case quite a lot, and I think it's just, you know, plugging in and out over time that's damaged the board. So I did swap out the fans to G-lid Stellas. They do look very nice though, and I think they look as good, if not better anyway. So just a little subtle change. So I think that's it for this video guys. I'll link all the parts down below that you'll see in this PC. I'm really pleased on how this came out. It looks fantastic as well, and yeah, just an awesome little system. So if you've got any more questions or comments, do leave them down below and I'll get back to you. Thank you for Scan for providing the 5800X3D and also the 3080 for this content, and some other stuff you'll see coming soon as well. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and ding the bell so you don't miss a future one. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.